Hey, listeners, welcome back to the show today. I am glad you are here and happy to introduce today's guest. Nir Eyal is on the show all the way from Singapore, and he is an expert on the intersection of psychology, technology, and business. He's a graduate and also previously taught at Stanford. He's an active investor in many habit forming businesses, and he's co founded and sold 2 tech companies. Nir was dubbed by the MIT Technology Review as the prophet of habit forming technology. Nir is the author of 2 best-selling books, Hooked, where he wrote about how to build habit-forming products, which is what we're going to talk about today on the podcast, and Indistractable, how to control your attention and choose your life, which we'll also talk about, which was named one of the the best business and leadership books of the year by Amazon, and one of the best personal development books of the year by Audible. Nir is the manager of his solo VC fund engagement partners and invest in habit-forming products to improve users' lives. He has also invested in Eventbrite, Anchor.fm, Canva, Product Hunt, FocusMate, and many more habit-forming companies. Much of Nir's career, he worked in the video gaming and advertising industries where he learned and applied the techniques used to motivate and manipulate users. He now focuses on helping companies create behaviors that benefit their users while educating people on how to build healthy habits to improve their own lives. Nir, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you on the show. I love talking about all the things that you love: technology, business, psychology, habits, performance optimization. And we'll talk about something a little controversial too, is if technology is actually hijacking our brains or not. And so I want to dive into this really cool intersection that has happened in the world, I would guess, over the past 20 years and accelerating more and more every year. The combination of psychology, technology, and business, and how those three things together. So, from your perspective, Nir, and I know the world knows a lot about this, but still, there's much more that we can learn because this is controlling a significant amount, or a lot of people think it's controlling a significant amount of our lives. So what's happening in those three intersections?
Yes, I mean, so my specialty is really around how can we use technology and psychology to improve people's lives, how to improve their everyday habits. So the class that I taught at the Stanford Graduate School of Business was all about how do you get people hooked on your product. And that sounds it sounds sinister. It sounds like manipulation, but remember, there's 2 kinds of manipulation. There is persuasion, which is where we get people to do things they want to do, and then there's coercion, which is getting people to do things they don't want to do. Coercion is the bad stuff, right? We don't want to coerce people. We don't want to get people to do things they don't want to do. Not only is that unethical, it's also bad for business because these days, let's face it, if a customer regrets doing business with you, they're not just going to stop doing business with you. They're going to tell all their friends not to do business with you either on
Yeah.
social media, right? They'll tell everybody, don't work with these people. So we would never want to use coercive tactics. That's a very short-sighted and unethical use of these methods. What we can do as business owners, as product designers, as managers, is use the psychology of habit forming products to help people build good habits. So it's not just Facebook and the video game companies that use these techniques. We can all use these techniques. So the kind of work that I do is for the kind of products and services that persuade people to do the things they themselves want to do. Well, how would we use that? We can get kids hooked onto online learning, which is something I've done and invested in with a company called Kahoot and Quizzes. These are companies that use the hook model to get kids hooked onto learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can use the hook model to get people hooked onto exercise. So one of the case studies in my first book, Hooked, is Fitbod, which is a product that gets people hooked to exercising in the gym. We can use these techniques to help people save money through a financial services product, to help them connect with loved ones. There's all kinds of ways we can use good habits to improve people's lives. So that's really the focus of my work. Of course, the flip side of good habits is that sometimes we have bad habits. Now, these aren't about the same products, right? So it's not that I'm saying get people hooked and then now I'm going to teach you how to get unhooked. No, no, no. I want you to get hooked onto the good habits, and I want you to mindfully understand how to disconnect and stop being distracted by the bad distractions. So while I help people find ways to hook their customers to products like financial services and education and various types of products, we may want to consider in our lives what are the distractions that pull us away from what we really want to do. And so what I do in my second book is to analyze the same psychology from an insider's perspective, given that, I wrote the book on how these products get you hooked. I understand exactly what they do. And so I can deconstruct for you, hey, why is it that I watch too much television? Why is it that my kids seem to always be playing video games? Why is it that I'm always checking my cell phone to see what emails I've received? And is that actually good for me? Or is it a distraction? So that's what my second book, Indistractable, is all about.
So when it comes to getting people hooked on products and services, it seems like depending on one's opinion and perspective in the world, one person could say this is good for a person, and one person could say this is bad for the person, right? So maybe the food industry, right? And there's an argument over, what type of food is good for you, or even supplement industry, where someone believes this would be good for that person, this would not. Is there, so that I'm guessing there's some sort of gray area there. How does one, as a business person and an entrepreneur, define the ethics of that and where those boundaries are?
Yeah, so it's a terrific question. So it's something I addressed in my first book, and I've written more about since. But I give people a two-part test that if you're asking yourself, okay, so this is a question for you. So now you have this superpower, this ability to manipulate people's minds. And remember, manipulation is not necessarily a bad thing. All design is manipulation, whether it's interaction design, whether it's interior design, graphic design, all design is manipulation, right? It's getting you to do or think something that the designer wants you to do or think. That is a form of manipulation. But again, there's two types of manipulation: coercion or persuasion. So persuasion is the ethical stuff, coercion is the unethical stuff. Now, there's a very simple word that differentiates persuasion and coercion. The difference between persuasion and coercion is regret. Regret. So if you do something, if you get somebody to do something that they later regret, that's coercion. That's something they did not want to do. And again, not only is it bad for your business, it's unethical. So there's a very simple test that we can use called the regret test, that to make sure we as an organization don't use a tactic that people would later regret, we run a regret test. What does a regret test look like? A regret test is when we actually bring people in, and we as designers do this all the time. This is called usability testing. Every designer on the face of the earth has done this before. We show people the low fidelity early design that we have, whether it's a website or an app or whatever we're designing. We show people the prototype and we get their take on it. We see what they do with it. And we can do the same thing when it comes to the regret test. The regret test says, would the user do what we have designed for them to do, knowing everything that we as the designer know?
Right.
Simple as that. If you knew what was going to happen, would you still use this product? And I would argue that regret test is much cheaper to do as a usability test up front before you have launched your product than after you've launched the product and now the whole world is mad at you.
Yeah.
So that's what we can do inside the company, right? To know whether we should use these tactics. But there's another step before this in terms of the individual, right? So whether you're a solo entrepreneur or working at a company that tries to persuade, and look, all businesses try and persuade people. You can ask yourself this two-part question to make sure that you are using these tactics ethically. Here's the two-part question. Number one is to look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, is what I'm working on materially improving people's lives? Okay. Is what I'm working on materially improving people's lives? Now, that's only something you can answer. This isn't a question for you to judge others or others to judge you. It is asking you to judge yourself. Is what I'm working on materially improving people's lives? But that's not enough. That's only part one of this two-part question. The second question is to ask yourself, am I the user? Okay. Am I the user? Now, why do I want you to ask that question? Because I want you to break the first rule of drug dealing. Chris, do you know what the first rule of drug dealing is?
Don't get high on your own supply.
That's exactly right. Never get high on your own supply. I'm not going to ask how you know that, but let's just say that that's the rule I want you to break. What do I mean? I want you to be the user. Why? Because if there are any deleterious effects to whatever it is you're working on, you're going to be the first one to know about it. Not only that, this is an overlooked secret to entrepreneurial success. Build something you want. Right. The hardest part about building a product, especially when it comes to, blue ocean opportunities, is figuring out what is it your customer really wants. Well, you don't always have this luxury, but an amazing hack is build for yourself. Why? Because you are the user and you understand what you want better than anybody else. So
Exactly.
if you can answer in the affirmative to these two questions, am I building something that materially improves people's lives? And I am the user, you fall into this quadrant of being what I call a facilitator. Now, that
Okay.
doesn't mean you can't make money building something that doesn't improve people's lives or that you're not the user. You certainly can. That's not the question. The question is, are you applying these very powerful psychological persuasion techniques for good in a way that is a good use of your human capital, this blip of time that you have on earth? Are you allocating that time in a way you'll be proud of? And I think if you pass that two-part test, not only are you in a good ethical position, you're also in a very enviable business position
Mm-hmm.
because you are building for somebody that you know intimately. You're building for yourself. And so in that case, you can't fail because let's face it here. In business, if you're starting a business, look, I've started 3 companies, had 2 successful exits. If you are looking to get rich by being an entrepreneur, you're just bad at math, right? Because the odds are horrible,
It's
right? Like
true.
most businesses do not work out.
Right.
However, if you are building a product that you yourself want, and whether your business goes IPO or not, doesn't matter. You built something in the world that you want to exist, your odds of success are 100%
Mm.
because you have built something that you yourself want. And I think you greatly increase your odds of business success too. But at least, worst case scenario, even if the business fails, you built a product that you want to see in the world, you succeeded. And so I think that following that two-part test is a good ethical imperative as well as a good business imperative.
What if you hit those points and you build something you want, but it exists in a red ocean as opposed to the blue ocean? But you still really love the product, you love the service, and you keep working at it. What are your thoughts? When do you cut costs? When do you pull back? When do you stop?
Yeah. Well, it really depends on why you're building. So
Okay.
I'll tell you a quick story as a sidebar. I have a friend who I met in college. He's one of my closest friends. We talk at least once a month, and he lives in LA. I'm in Singapore, and we graduated in 2001. So 20 years ago, I graduated from college, and right after college, he goes to LA and he wants to be an actor.
Hmm.
And we're like, okay, great. We're going to see you on TV and the movies someday. Well, 20 years later, he hasn't made it. Right. He's still working hard. And and a few years ago, I asked him, I was like, hey, you've been doing this for a long time now. Like, when is it time to hang it up? Like maybe you're not going to be a famous actor. And he says, look, this is my job. My
Right.
job is to audition. That's my job. I can't do anything else. Like, I am called to do this. Now, whether somebody picks me because they like the shape of my nose or my face or my voice, that's not really up to me. I have to do this. And he's actually really happy whether or not he's famous. It doesn't actually matter to him,
Mm.
right? I mean, would he like to be famous? Sure. But he's, I think, put himself in the right frame of mind that he's controlling everything he can control.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest that he can't control, whether some director, likes his nose or not, is not up to him. He's doing the best he can. And I think that's actually the healthiest way to be an entrepreneur, is to do the thing that you are called to do. Like, do the thing that you can't imagine doing anything else. My friend cannot imagine doing anything but auditioning to be an actor, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is what he has to do. And he told me, he's like, I would love to do anything but I can't. Like, this is what I have to do.
Yeah.
So I would say for an entrepreneur, it is so hard to be an entrepreneur. I've started and sold several companies. It is so difficult. It is
Mm-hmm.
so much work. Like, you would save your time. You would save yourself so much time and money if you did it pretty much anything else. But if you have to do this, then you have to do it. And that should be the only reason you do it, is because you can't think of anything else you'd rather do.
Right. But is there a limit? So say you spend 10 years building this product or service, and 10 years is a long time, right? Maybe just 5 years, and you're just not making any money off of it. Do you say when's that cutoff point where you say, okay, maybe it's time to shift and create something new that is in alignment, that is very similar? Like maybe your friend, instead of and I don't know your friend, but instead of one genre of movies, shifts to another genre of movies, but is still and maybe it works, but is still acting, right? So
Yeah,
so
yeah.
what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So the process of being an entrepreneur, I think, is being a professional student. So you're a student too. It's not about making money. I think a lot of people start businesses because they say, oh, I want to make a lot of money. I want to get rich. I want to be my own boss. Little do they know when they start a business, it's not that you don't have a boss. It's that everybody else now becomes your boss. Your customer becomes your boss. Your employees become your boss. Everybody else is now your boss. You have 100 bosses as opposed to one, because you're the boss. Surprise. And it can be very, very stressful. But your job, I think, as a professional student, as an entrepreneur, you're constantly learning. And I think it's the entrepreneurs who don't learn who fail. So just as you're saying, successful entrepreneurs, what we see is that they connect the dots. They find luck. Like they literally see, they've done these experiments on folks where they will find that some people see opportunities where others don't. They do these experiments where they, put $100 bill on the ground, and some people will literally walk by the $100 bill, think to themselves, oh, it's just fake money, and they don't even bother to pick it up.
Right.
Whereas there's some people in the world who say, whoa, look at that. There's an opportunity. Let me jump on it. They did these experiments with people where they asked them to do a very tedious task of circling all the T's in a magazine, right? They give them a bunch of papers. They say, you have to look at the magazine. I want you to circle all the T's. But some people, they flipped through the magazine first, and they noticed that there was a sheet that said, ignore these instructions, flip to the back and hand the book to the proctor. And those people who zoomed out a little bit and saw, wait a minute, okay, what's the big picture here? And they flipped through, they kind of wanted to suss out the scope of the work. They saw that, whereas other people tediously circled all the T's and it sucked, right? So there's something about that entrepreneurial mentality of looking at the big picture, of zooming out and saying, okay, what's the big picture here? What am I really trying to accomplish? And sometimes that means tacking and pivoting when you see new opportunities, right? So I'm not averse to that. It's about that insight of noticing those opportunities and grabbing them when they come along. So it's not that you have to, hit your head against the wall for years, whether you like it or not, on one idea forever and ever. It's about the persistence to keep going. It's about being a nonstop person who is not necessarily just working on one stupid idea their whole life, but is that this constant student of what their customers and employees are saying, and that helps them find the proper path.
Let's talk about in your book Hooked. You talk about building products that create habit forming behavior. And I would guess this includes services as well. Is that, do those overlap? Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. And then you talk about there's a looping cycle to think of when creating these products and services, a trigger, an action, a variable reward, and a continued investment. Can you walk us through those 4 stages?
Sure, absolutely. So the hook model is an experience designed to connect the user's problem with your product with enough frequency to form a habit. So what kind of products are good candidates to form a habit? It's not about enterprise or consumer. It's about frequent or infrequent. Okay, that's the number one criteria. So sometimes I get companies that hire me to help them with their product, habit forming products. Or I'm an active angel investor. I've invested in over 30 companies and 3 unicorns so far. And so the number one criteria of a company that I will not invest in, or I will say, look, I don't think you're a good candidate to build a habit, is one where the product is not used with sufficient frequency. Okay, right. Very, very difficult to change a consumer habit if the behavior does not occur with sufficient frequency. Now, that cutoff is about a week's time or less. Okay,
once a week, then
about once a week, right? Okay. Or less. So there's a lot of rumors out there and myths. To create a habit, you have to do a behavior for 66 days or 45 days. It's nonsense. That's not true. What we do know, what the studies do find, is that the more frequently the behavior occurs, the more likely it is to become a habit. So. Right. When we think about the reason my work is so focused on technology is that when we think about these devices we all carry around with us in our pockets, the average smartphone user checks their screen 150 times a day on average, 150 times a day.
I measured that.
That's why there's true. So much opportunity, right? Yeah. Because that very high sense of frequency means that we now have the opportunity to reach consumers in a very high frequency format. So that's the number one gate. Is your product used with sufficient frequency? Now, I would back up actually one step before and ask, does your business even need a habit? If a product is sold once, it's sales driven, not product driven. Okay. If your product is bought once, it's sales driven, right? So insurance, right? Cybersecurity software, right? The kind of product that you buy once and you don't have to use it unless, you get in a car accident or something. That's not a good candidate for a habit. The problem is, if you don't build a habit, you need some other competitive advantage. So let's take car insurance, for example. Car insurance is something that you buy once and hopefully you never have to use, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, if you look at industries like car insurance, they beat each other up. Competitors beat each other up based on price and features, right? Geico comes out and says, oh, 15 minutes will save you 15% on car insurance. Okay, well, then the competitor comes out and says, oh, yeah, 12 minutes will save you 20% on car insurance. And they're fighting each other tooth and nail
Right.
on price and features, which, of course, decreases margins. Habit forming products don't have to do that, right? Habit forming products, the customer stops even asking about the competition. Think about Google.
Mm-hmm.
Google owns about 90% of the search engine market. What they have is a monopoly of the mind. Why? Because how many of us, before we Google something, think to ourselves, who has the best search engine? Nobody does that. We just Google it with little or no conscious thought. In fact, one of my former clients, I did a consulting project for Microsoft with Bing. And they were so desperate to figure out how to make this search engine competitive, right? Microsoft owns Bing, the number 2 search engine in the world. And I told them, don't. You don't have a chance. And this was after they came to me and they said, look, we have an incentive program. We're going to use gamification. We're going to get people to use our search engine. Bing, for a while, they would pay people. They would literally give people money to get them to search with their search engine. Mm-hmm. And it still didn't work, right? Because Google has this monopoly of the mind. It's not that they force you to search with Google. It's that in your brain, let's just Google it. And in fact, some people say, well, Google's better. That's why I search with it. No, it's not. In head-to-head comparisons of Google versus Bing, third-party studies have shown if you strip out the branding so people don't know which is which, it's a 50-50 preference split.
Okay.
Literally, it's a 50-50 split between which one people prefer. So the only reason we keep using a product like Google is out of habit. And the same goes for Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and WhatsApp, all these tech products. It's purely a habit that keeps us coming back. I mean, you could code up Twitter in an afternoon. It's no big deal, right? Yeah. But this habit is what keeps us coming back. So all that's preamble to go into your question around, okay, what is the hook model? What's the secret pattern that these companies are using and what can we learn from it? So if your product is one where the business model needs repeat engagement, okay, where your product needs to be used. So if you're building enterprise SaaS software, right? If the customer doesn't use it, they're going to stop paying for it. If you're building any kind of product, software, not software, online, offline, doesn't matter, enterprise, consumer, where you need repeat engagement, where wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to spend all that money on spammy advertising and messaging to consumers? What if consumers came back on their own? What would that do for your business? Now you're a good candidate to build a habit. Okay, So what is the hook model? The hook model has 4 steps, starts with a trigger. Okay, there are 2 kinds of triggers. We have what we call an external trigger and an internal trigger. We'll get back to those internal triggers in a minute. An external trigger is a ping, a ding, a ring, something in your outside environment that tells you what to do next. Okay, we see these every day. We design these into our products. It's any kind of message that tells you what to do. The next step is the action phase. The action phase is defined as the simplest behavior done in anticipation of a reward. So opening an app, scrolling a feed, pushing a play button, the simplest thing your user can do to get relief from that discomfort, to find what they're looking for. Okay, that's the action phase. And there's all kinds of techniques we can use to make that behavior as easy as possible to do, because the easier something is to do, the more likely people are to do it. And there's a lot of research there that we can talk about. The third step of the hook is called the variable reward phase. Variable rewards come out of the work of B.F. Skinner, the father of operant conditioning. Skinner did these amazing experiments where he took pigeons. This was back in the 1940s and 50s. He took pigeons and he put them in a little box. Today we call this a Skinner box. And he allowed the pigeons to peck at a little disc to receive a reward, to get a little food pellet. And at first, every time the pigeon pecked at the disc, they would receive this little treat, this little food pellet. So very quickly, Skinner could train these pigeons through what's called operant conditioning, right? If you've ever had a puppy or maybe a kid, this is how we get puppies and children to do things. We give them a treat and then they do what we want, right? So that's what Skinner did with these pigeons. Great, not a big deal. But then something interesting happened. One day, Skinner walked into his lab and he realized he didn't have enough of these treats. Okay, he didn't have enough of these rewards. So he couldn't afford to give it to the pigeons every time they pecked at the disc. He could only afford to give it to them once in a while. So sometimes the pigeon would peck at the disc, no food pellet would come out. The next time the pigeon would peck at the disc, they would receive a reward.
Okay.
And to Skinner's amazement, what happened was that the rate of response, the number of times the pigeon pecked at the disc, increased when the reward was given on a variable schedule of reinforcement. So this mechanic is endemic to all sorts of things that we find engaging, engrossing, the kind of things that capture our attention, won't let go. These are called variable rewards. And once you see them in the world, you can't unsee them. They're everywhere. If you think about spectator sports, okay, why do we hyperventilate about watching some stupid ball bounce along a court or a net or a pitch? Why are we all obsessed with some ball going into a basket or a puck going into a net? It's variability,
Reward.
right?
Yeah.
It's variability. What's going to happen? I don't know who's going to score, who's going to win. Why do we love reading, romance novels or great works of fiction? It's all about uncertainty. How is the conflict going to resolve? Why does the news media keep us hooked? Is it really because we give a shit about somebody suffering 3,000 miles away? Not really. It's because there's variability. What's new? What's different, right? This drama that the media wants us to watch, not because they want to keep us informed, but because they know their business model is predicated on the first three letters of news, NEW. What's new? What's different, right? That's what we're hooked to. The stock market. Why do people day trade? Day trading is pretty much the worst way you can invest your money, right? It's not a good way to make profits. Much better way is just to be a passive investor. But we like that feeling of control, that the variability of the stock market is just like a slot machine, right? Slot machines, or all games of chance, are all about uncertainty, right? When you pull in a slot machine, what's going to happen next? What might I win? That's a variable reward, just like Skinner's pigeons. Online, we see this in spades. When you think about the feed, right? Why does everything that we use online have a feed these days? The Facebook feed, the Instagram feed, the LinkedIn feed, all these feeds. Well, what is it? When you scroll on your feed, some things are interesting, some things are boring. And to see more of that content, you have to scroll and scroll, just like pulling on a slot machine. So that variable reward mechanic is endemic to all sorts of habit-forming products. That's what keeps us coming back. Okay. Now we can use this to great effect. We can use this as the engine for healthy behaviors, like Kahoot does for education, like Fitbod does for fitness. We can use that as that engine to keep people coming back. Now, the last step of the hook model is the investment phase. And this is probably the most overlooked and I think most interesting part of the hook model. This is where the user puts something into the product in anticipation of some kind of future benefit. And it does this through what's called stored value. Stored value is when you put something into the product and the product is made better with use. Now, this is a really, really big deal. Okay. In the history of business, it always took a long time to customize a product to user needs. So when Henry Ford famously said, you can have any color of Model T as long as it's black, the reason he said that was because it was a lot of work back in the day to retool his factory so that you could make a green car and a blue car and a red car. That was a lot of work. Right? Now, of course, manufacturing since then, car manufacturers have gotten really good at that. Now you have a lot of choice, a lot of selection, but still it takes a long time for you. If you say, look, I want this kind of car with these kind of features, okay, we'll deliver it to you in 6 to 8 weeks. Today, habit-forming technologies facilitated through these interactive platforms that we have carrying around in our pockets, our smartphones, this is done in real time. So what's amazing about interactive technology is that you can make a product for a market size of one at scale. That if you were to log into my Facebook account or my Pinterest account, it actually wouldn't be interesting to you because it has been tailored to my tastes based on my data that I have invested in that platform. And it's made better and better the more I use it. So what's so crazy about these technologies, if you think about offline products, right? A car, furniture, clothing, all of these things, they depreciate, right? They depreciate with use. The more you use them, the less they are worth. Habit-forming products do the opposite. Think about this. They appreciate. They get better and better the more we use them because of the more data we put into these platforms. So that investment phase from a product perspective is a key to building a habit forming product, because the more it's used, the stickier it gets, the better it gets, and therefore more likely people are to return to it. So that the ultimate goal of a habit forming product is to connect to an internal trigger. What's an internal trigger? We talked about this when I started explaining the hook model.
Right.
As opposed to an external trigger, which is all these pings and dings in our
Dings.
outside environment. An internal trigger comes from within the user. Okay. An internal trigger is typically an uncomfortable emotional state that the user seeks to escape from. Boredom, loneliness, fatigue, anxiety, uncertainty. This is what a habit forming product will attach itself to, so that when the user feels a certain way, they use the product or service with little or no conscious thought, purely out of habit. Now, think about how amazingly powerful that is, that you don't even have to send someone a ping or ding or an advertisement or anything to get them to take an action. They prompt themselves whenever they feel a certain way.
Right.
So that eventually a habit forming product doesn't even need those external triggers. We know there's been several studies now that find that only 10% of the time that people check their phone, 10%, is because of an external trigger. 90% of the time that we check our phones, we are checking our phones because of an internal trigger. Loneliness, boredom, fatigue, stress, anxiety, uncertainty. That is what prompts us to check these devices, because we are looking to escape discomfort.
Right.
And of course, the products that we use to escape that discomfort is what we form habits with. So that's the ultimate goal of a habit forming product.
So out of if we check our phones on average 150 times per day, 15 of those more or less are external triggers and 135 of those are internal triggers, right?
Right.
So I've got a couple of questions on that. Is that having that type of internal triggers, so many of those types of internal triggers, do you think that's healthy?
So that's a whole nother question.
Uh-huh.
Right? So that's what Indistractable, my second book, is all about. And I would say, is technology good? Is it bad? Is it ethical? Is it unethical? Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? The answer is yes. It's all those things. It's about how we use it. Right. Technology is a tool. A hammer is a tool. A hammer can be used to build a house or bash someone's head in. Right. So it's really about how we use it. I think that we can absolutely have our cake and eat it too, that we can build technology to improve people's lives. So if an app like Fitbod gets you to build a habit of going to the gym and exercising, that's awesome. Great. That's super healthy. No one's getting addicted to, SaaS software or education software or these products that help people live healthier lives. Now, the other end of the spectrum is like, what if I use a product that I later regret using, right? If I spend too much time watching Netflix, right? Netflix uses the hook model in spades. Facebook, of course, uses the hook model. Instagram, Slack, right? Email is probably the mother of habit forming products. And let me tell you, as entrepreneurs, as business people, many of us way overdo it when it comes to our work, right? Many of us are escaping. We talked about those internal triggers. This is where, we segue into becoming indistractable. The way we become indistractable is to dismantle these hooks that don't serve us. So what we want to do is to build good hooks in our lives that help us build good habits and break the bad habits by dismantling the hooks. And that starts with understanding those internal triggers. So for example, we think, oh, work, exercise, these things are good, these things are healthy. Well, look, if it takes you away from doing other things, if you're going to work, and I know many people like this, I went to Stanford and we had many of these, type A personalities that they were, I don't know if they're workaholics, that's not a real thing, but they were definitely going to work for other reasons, right? They were looking to prove something to somebody who thought they weren't good enough. They were escaping a terrible home life situation because they weren't getting along with their wife. They hate their kids, so they go to the office, right? They checked email 1 million times a day so that they wouldn't have to think about the shit going on in their real life, right? Yeah. So we want to make sure that no matter what that behavior is, it's something that serves us as opposed to we are serving it. So becoming indistractable is not just about, too much email or too much Facebook or too much technology. It's about anything that takes us away from what we plan to do with our time, our attention, and our life.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. Another on the 4 looping cycles, we were talking about variable rewards. Yeah. And you were talking about the kind of addiction or the longing that we have for participating in activities that are variable, right? Uncertain. What's the psychology behind that? Why is it so thrilling for us or addicting or exciting for us to participate in things that have that uncertainty?
Yeah, the variability. Yeah, and it's not only us. I mean, it was Skinner's pigeons. It's
Yeah.
all kinds
Animals.
of animals.
Yeah.
Yeah, all kinds of animals have this response to variability. And without getting too, without geeking out too much in terms of the brain science here, this is
Oh,
called
geek away,
prediction
geek away.
error.
You can geek away.
The
Yeah.
reason we like this so much is that it turns out that the brain, we used to think the brain is a computer. Every generation thinks that the brain works like its latest technology. So from the ancient Egyptians to during the Industrial Revolution, they thought the brain was all about like pipes and fluids and steam and things like that. No, that doesn't work that way. In our modern age, many people think the brain is like a computer. It's calculating mathematical functions. No, it doesn't work like that either. What we're discovering today is that the brain is a prediction machine.
Mhm.
And so what your brain is constantly doing is seeing the world through a hallucination,
Okay.
informed by your past memories, by what
Mhm.
we call a prior. So what your brain is doing is it's seeing the world through input. Because remember, your brain is not actually seeing the world. It's getting electrical impulses that are trying to make sense of the world around you, but it can't process everything that's happening all at once. So there's billions of bits of information happening. It has to selectively focus on the most important thing all the time. That's why attention management is so important.
Mhm.
So in order to do that, it's constantly checking the input signals from your senses to what it already knows with your priors. And so anytime that there's a discrepancy between what your brain thinks is going to happen and what is happening, that's
Mhm.
when we perk up. That's
Okay.
actually the role of dopamine. We hear a lot of the
Oh.
time people who don't really understand what dopamine is all about. They seem to they suggest that dopamine is like this feel good chemical, and the neurotransmitter that it's like cocaine in the brain. It's totally not true. Dopamine is not a feel good hormone. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that gets you to pay attention. It says, "Oh, something different here, something new." Right.
Okay.
So whenever there's something we don't expect or we're not sure how to predict, the brain really focuses in on that, right? Really wants to know what's going to happen next, because this is how we learn. This is how we can more
Mm.
accurately assess the way the world works, is through cause and effect. And when
Okay.
suddenly something worked one way, and now different, that's when we perk up. That's when we focus. That's when we engage. And so that's really why we are become hooked to these variable rewards. It's an evolutionary adaptation, right? That we want to be very attuned to understanding how things work for our very survival. In Hooked, I talk about this fascinating phenomenon. Let me geek out again a bit here from an anthropological
Please
perspective.
do. Yeah.
There's this mystery for ages around how is it that human beings first hunted meat, right? Because there's this vision that, oh, human beings had bows and arrows and clubs, and we like went up to an animal and we hit, speared them and killed them, and like that's how we ate them. And it's actually not true. That if anybody who's ever shot a bow and arrow before, you can't actually get that far with much strength, right? Like you can't take down an animal with primitive bow and arrow from far distance. You have to get pretty
Right.
darn close
Yeah.
to kill an animal. Turns out the way we did this was called persistence hunting, and there's some tribes in Africa who still do this today. And the
Mhm.
way persistence hunting works is the most fit males in the tribe typically will find the biggest animal they can find. So in this case, they hunt kudu, which is a type of antelope, and they look for the big ones. They look for the ones with the huge horns
Mhm.
and the big male down, which is different from like how lions hunt. Lions will hunt the weak, the young, the slow. But of course,
Okay.
humans can't run very fast, right? But what we can do is we can run very far. And
Right.
so what they will do, still to this day, they'll find that big kudu who has this huge horns, who can't run for very far but can run fast, and they'll keep chasing them and chasing them and chasing them, and they'll run the distance of about a marathon until this huge animal collapses of exhaustion.
Mhm.
So if you've ever wondered why is it that humans are the only hairless apes, have you noticed that? How we're the only primates that don't have a bunch of hair,
Yeah.
right? If you look at a deer, an antelope, most animals are covered with fur.
Yeah.
Dogs, right? A great way to kill your dog is to go jogging with them. Dogs are not meant to jog; they're meant to sprint. Most
Right.
animals who are covered with fur are meant to sprint. The reason we're hairless is because we perspire. We have these sweat glands that keep us cool and allow us to keep running and running and running and running for 10, 20 miles,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's the way we killed animals. Now, how does all this relate to variable rewards? If you can imagine a hunter who has to track an animal for 20 miles until that animal gives up and collapses. And by the way, that's when we would spear them. Spears
Yeah.
are only good at literally point blank range. When
Yeah.
when they would kill the animal, and they still do this today, they're right up next to the animal because the animal is exhausted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when they kill them. It's not, even bow and arrow, they use a bow and arrow to bleed the animal to death, not to kill them from a distance. So in order to do that, in order to get our bodies to follow our brains, we needed to hone in to tunnel vision on
Right.
which direction that animal was going, right? And so that is a slot machine. That's a variable reward of what, are they going to break left, right, what speed? And so that ability to focus in on what's different, what's changing, that's a tremendous evolutionary adaptation. So that's why we have this fascination with variable rewards.
That's absolutely fascinating. I think that's so. I mean, I love understanding how our brain's working and how it relates to achieving things in the world. I think that is just phenomenal. Do you in some way it has to be kind of related to our fight or flight response as well, right? Because it's the almost like the brain is saying there's a change. Should I fight, flight, freeze? What should I do? And it's kind of like it forces that attention that maybe we're not getting in other areas of our lives.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, this is, habits are just another form of learning. That's all they
Mm-hmm.
are. And about
Mm-hmm.
40% of what you do day in and day out is purely done out of habit,
Mm-hmm.
defined as these behaviors done with little or no conscious thought. And so it's a tremendous evolutionary adaptation for us to be able to not think about every little thing. Like, remember the first time you learned to drive a car, right? Where if you were 15, 16, 17, you were white knuckling it, right? You have to think about every little thing when you're driving, and it's stressful, and you have to be super hyper vigilant and aware to make sure you don't get in an accident.
Uh-huh.
Now, when you're an adult, you can drive a car and have a conversation and, drink on your Slurpee, and, you can do a lot of different things because your brain has put the driving process, the skill that you acquired, on autopilot, it's on habit. And that's an incredibly powerful skill. Now, the danger of habits is because habits are defined as behaviors done with little or no conscious thought. Sometimes we can do these things on autopilot that we later look back and say, wait, what was I doing? Was that actually a good use of time? And
Mm-hmm.
many of us today are trapped in these busyness cycles, right? Not business, but busyness cycles, where we're working all day long, running around like chickens with their heads cut off, thinking we're productive. And because it's a mindless habit, we never stop to ask ourselves, wait a minute, is this constant email checking and Slack notifications and meetings and phone calls, like, is this actually what I need to be doing with my time? Is
Mm-hmm.
this helping me live consistently with my values? And without snapping out of that, we can go down this habit trap of just, repeating these cycles. And we wake up 20, 30 years later and we say, what the hell was I doing with my life? What was I doing with my business? I was on
Exactly.
autopilot. I wasn't really thinking things through.
So I'm curious if you I'm sure you do. What are some ways where that help you become more aware of that? So I have this exercise that I do probably every couple of years where I spend a couple of weeks just writing down what I do every 20 minutes for basically Monday through Friday for 2 weeks, right? And it's very eye opening because then I become like a fly on the wall of my own behaviors. And I think the first time I did it, I realized I was wasting like 3 hours a day. And this was 12
Mm-hmm.
years ago when I first did it. And it was
Mm,
shocking. And then I
shocking,
did
right?
it. I did it a couple of years ago, and I realized, man, I'm like, I spend too much time in the bathroom getting ready and showering and doing, I'm like, how can I minimize that so I can spend more time either working or doing the things I love? So, what are
Yeah.
some things that you do or that others can do to help them become more aware of the useless
Sure.
habits that we've picked up?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a great segue to indistractable.
Perfect.
So here again, there are 4 steps. I'm very partial to 4 steps,
Okay.
and just so happen to be that there's 4 steps to becoming indistractable. Starting with where we left off in terms of the hooked model, in terms of how to build good habits, the best place to start is with these internal triggers. So as a
Mm-hmm.
reminder, internal triggers are these uncomfortable emotional states. that we look to escape from. Now, we can escape those uncomfortable emotional states with good behaviors, things that move us forward in life, things that move us towards what we want, things that are in accordance with our values and intentions. This is called acts of traction. Now, the opposite of traction is distraction.
Okay.
Distraction is any action that pulls us away from what we plan to do, further away from our goals and values, further away from becoming the kind of person we want to become. So the first place to start is understanding what are those internal triggers in your life and how can you master them as opposed to letting them become your master. Because here's the thing. Write this down if you can, if you're listening to me right now. Time management is pain management. This is a really important point. Time management is pain management. Before we understand really why do we go off track, why do we get distracted, which by the way is not a new problem. It's not these cell phones and the internet and Facebook and Netflix that cause distraction. Plato, the Greek philosopher, talked about distraction 2,500 years ago. This is part of the human condition. People have always been complaining about distraction. It is not a new problem. So what we have to realize is to ask ourselves, wait a minute, why do we get distracted exactly? If you know what to do, why don't you just freaking do it? Right? Like, who doesn't know that if you want to get in shape, you have to exercise and eat right? Does anybody need another stupid diet book to tell us how to do that? We know. If you want to do great at your job, right? What do you have to do? You have to do the hard work that other people don't want to do. That's how you get better at your job. Do the work. You know what to do. Why don't we do it? If you want to have great relationships, you know how you have a great relationship? You consistently put in time with the people you love. Right? We know that. Why don't we do it? Right? Why do we sit around the dinner table on our phones as opposed to being fully present with the people we love? This is such a fascinating question. And by the way, I suffered from this. I was the most distracted person you'd ever met. It took me 5 years to write Indistractable. Guess what? Because I got distracted all the time.
And you needed
That's why
right?
I need to write this book.
Yeah,
What's that?
You were the best customer for the product you created, right?
That's exactly right. I wrote Indistractable because, funny enough, when I wrote Hooked, I wasn't as busy, right? It was only after I wrote Hooked and the book started doing really well and selling hundreds of thousands of copies, I started getting speaking engagements and consulting work and cool angel investment opportunities. I got so busy that I was distracted from doing the thing that I really loved and made me successful in the first place, the writing, right? I got distracted from when I was with my daughter and I'd be checking my phone as opposed to being fully present with her. And that's when I wanted to really figure out, okay, how do I become indistractable? If I know what I want to do, why don't I just do it? So that's when I started, diving into this research over the past 5 years of writing the book to really figure out the deeper psychology of distraction. Because I didn't like this idea that, oh, it's just our technology that's making us distracted. That's silly. It's not true. It's a much deeper problem than that. Starting with these internal triggers. So in order to understand why we go off track, why we don't do the things we say we're going to do, we have to understand motivation, right? What is motivation? Many people think erroneously that motivation is about carrots and sticks. We've all heard this before, right? It's about the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. Sigmund Freud said this with his pleasure principle. Jeremy Bentham said something similar. It's not true. We do not do what we do for the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. That is not true. That's an antiquated model. Turns out everything you do is you do for only one reason and one reason only. And that is the desire to escape discomfort. That's it. The desire to escape discomfort. All human behavior, even seeking something pleasurable, right?
Yeah.
Desire, wanting, craving, lusting for pleasure is motivating because it hurts.
Yeah.
Right? There's a reason we say love hurts.
Yeah.
It does. Neurologically speaking, that is exactly what's going on. So what that means, therefore, if all human behavior is about the desire to escape discomfort, that means time management is pain management. So if we are going to do what we say we're going to do in life, we have to realize that procrastination, distraction, it's not a character flaw. Okay. There's nothing wrong with you. People overdiagnose themselves. They medicalize normal behavior thinking, oh, the only solution is to go get a diagnosis and a pill. For some people, that's a good option. Very, very small single digit percentages of people actually have anything that needs a diagnosis or a pill. The vast majority of us, we're just distracted. We haven't learned the tactics to deal with discomfort that comes from hard work, that comes from boredom, loneliness, uncertainty, fatigue in a way that leads us towards traction rather than distraction. So that's step number one, master the internal triggers.
Nice. Can we talk more in depth on indistractable? Because I just love learning and sharing the things that could really help people create
Sure.
these boundaries in their lives, because it's it's a it's a pathway in our brain, right? We create a habit, it creates a pathway in our brain to, instead of going to the gym when we know it's good for us, to eat the ice cream or stay at home or watch Netflix or whatever is the easier thing. So you talked about the first one, right? And there's four in total. What are the four again?
Right. So the first step is to master the internal triggers, and there's all kinds of
Okay.
steps we can talk about. There's dozens of different techniques that anyone can use
Hmm.
to to master those internal triggers. So what I wanted to give people is a bunch of arrows in their quiver that they can use
Okay.
whenever they feel that discomfort to know what they are going to do so that they are led towards traction rather than distraction. That's the most important first step.
Okay.
No tricks, no tips, no techniques will work unless you first master internal triggers. And we can talk about how to do that with some very practical steps. The
Okay.
second step, just to kind of give you an overview of all four, the second step is to make time for traction, right? So we talked about traction is the opposite of distraction.
Hmm.
So what we have to do is we have to understand that you cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. I
Hmm.
have worked with hundreds of people who complain to me about how distracted they are and how their boss wants this and their kids want that. And did you see what happened in the news? I can't seem to get done what I want to get done. And then I say, well, what did you get distracted from exactly? What was on your schedule that you didn't do?
Hmm.
And they say, my schedule? No, I have a to do list. Look at all the things on my to do list. And I say, I see your problem.
Right.
People don't understand this. To do lists are one of the worst things you can do for your personal productivity, because if you look at your to do list to tell yourself what to do before you look at your calendar,
Hmm.
you've made a huge mistake. We have to plan our time. If we don't plan our time, somebody is going to plan it for us. And we can talk about why to-do lists and running your life on a to-do list is so toxic. We can get into that. So that's step number 2, is making time for traction. Understanding how you will spend your time is a critically important technique. The third step is to hack back the external trigger. So this is where we get into the nitty gritty of how do I remove all those pings and dings that don't serve me on my phone, on my computer, meetings. Oh my God, how many of us spend so much time in stupid meetings
Yeah.
that are nothing but a distraction?
Yeah.
Email, right? How much time do we spend on email? Well, there's a technique that you can use that reduces the time you spend on email by up to 90%, 90% that I can share with you. So
Yes.
that's about hacking back all these external triggers. Even our kids, by the way, so many of us work from home now. Our kids are a huge distraction. What do we do about that? So I show you exactly what to do about that. The fourth and final step is to prevent distraction with pacts. Pacts are what we call a pre-commitment device. It's when we decide in advance what firewall we will erect, what barrier to getting distracted we will have in place, so that if everything else fails, how do we make sure we stay on course? And so
Hmm.
it's these 4 strategies in concert: mastering internal triggers, making time for traction, hacking back external triggers, and preventing distraction with pacts. These 4 techniques in concert. I didn't do the research that created these techniques. This is decades old stuff. What
Right.
I did was put together these techniques into a framework anyone can use, whether you read the book or not, frankly, that anyone can use to understand why they got distracted and to do something about it.
Right. Uh, that email hack you were talking about, I would love to hear what
Oh,
that
that
is.
piqued your interest, huh?
Yeah. Yep. 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 Pain points right there.
Yeah, yeah. Email is the bane of many knowledge workers' existence, and so
One of
that
the
that
things. Go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, no, please.
Oh, I was just going to say one of the things I do, because I manage my phone really well. I turn it
Mm-hmm.
off roughly an hour before bed, and then I keep it off more or less until noon the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's served me really, really well to minimize those distractions, because I notice if I get into those miscellaneous messages before noon, the morning time of workflow will really, you know, it would just knock me out. And
Yeah.
so but the one thing I haven't yet quite mastered is the email, because email is easily accessible on the laptop or computer. And I just like, it's kind of like a game. I'll have, after
Yeah,
a
totally.
day, 50 to 75 emails. And then it's like, oh, if I get it down to 20 or 15, I succeeded. And those other 15 that they just lay there, I can revisit them later on in a week, sort of thing. So.
By the way, do you see the variable rewards there?
Yes.
Behind emails, right? The uncertainty of what's in an email, right? Is it good news? Is it bad news? Is it silly stuff? Is it spam? Is it important? Is it funny? Right? There's so much variability. Who's it from? Right? There's so much variability. It's a little slot machine in your pocket, and it's a great tool. I'm not bad mouthing email or any technology. Frankly, it's a great tool, but we have to make sure we learn how to use it as opposed to letting it use us. So. One thing, so you've done one thing very, very well, which is to schedule that time. Many people, when they can't think of what else to do with their time, check email. When they're stressed, check email. When they're anxious, they check email. When they're uncertain, they check email. That's bad news, right? Because again, we have to start with the internal trigger. So first, do the homework that I assign for how to manage those internal triggers. That's the most important first step, to know what you will do when you feel stress, uncertainty, whatever are these internal triggers that people that prompt people to check email. It doesn't necessarily cure that uncertainty or fatigue or whatever. But it gives temporary relief. So we have to make sure we understand why we are being triggered internally to look for escape from those bad feelings through email. So that's the first step. Second step is to schedule that time. So what we want to do is to make sure we have time in our day for managing email. Don't just do it whenever you feel like it. Have the time booked, just like you would book a meeting or whatever else you'd want to do. Have that time scheduled so hey, that time is coming. Okay, so if you find, I really need the morning time to do my reflective, focused work, so that you're not constantly thinking, but when am I going to check email? When am I going to check email? Know that you have that time scheduled on your calendar. Okay. Right. The next thing, so to really dive deep into what we do about email, when we do time studies of where people waste time on email, it's fascinating where the time is wasted. Okay. So time wasted on email is not with the checking or the replying. The time wasted on email is the rechecking. That's the problem. That's where we waste most of our time. You know what I'm talking about?
Exactly
here, right?
What I do. Yeah.
You open an email. What's in it? Oh, I don't need that right now. Let me close it, put it away. What's in that other email? Oh, let me open it, close it, put it away. So that's where people waste time on email. So here's how we do it. Here's how we reduce the time you spend on email by up to 90%. Here's what we do. You make a rule that says you only touch email 2 times. Okay. The first time you touch that email, you are going to open that email and ask yourself the most important question concerning email from a time management perspective, which is not what does the email say? That's not the right question. The right question is, when does it need a reply? Okay. So the first time you check that email, when does it need a reply? Okay. And then it's going to fall into a few buckets. Either never, right? So if it's spam or if it's just some message that doesn't need your response, the answer is never. You just delete it or archive it right away. Okay. That's the first bucket. The next bucket is, this email is, oh my God, super important. House is on fire. You have to respond right away. That's about less than 1% of your emails. Why? Right. Because if your house is on fire, somebody's not going to email you. They're going to call you, right? So people think that 80% of their email is house on fire type of emails. It's actually less than 1%. Okay. Yeah. Very, very few of your emails do you need to actually respond to right now.
Right.
Now, about 20% of your emails will need a response today. Okay. So something that's urgent, but not this minute, it can be responded to within 24 hours. Okay. So what I want you to do is, when you get those kind of emails, I want you to label them with, everybody's email service provider has labels, whether it's Outlook or Gmail or whatever. If you don't know how to do it, Google it. Label the email today. Okay. Then put it away, check the next email. The 80% of your email, the remaining 80% or so of your email, will be email that can be responded to sometime this week. Okay. 80% of your emails, turns out time studies show, don't need a response today. They can be responded to sometime this week. I want you to label those as this week. So does that make sense? So if it's super urgent, the 1% of emails that need a response right away, go ahead. It almost never happens. But if it's, house is actually on fire, take care of it. If it's the 20% of emails that need a response sometime today, mark it as such as with the label. If it's sometime this week, mark it as such a label. Now we have the second pass. Okay. The second time we reply to emails. Don't reply to all those emails just yet. When you have that time on your calendar for emailing, what I want you to do is to book one time slot in your day to only respond to the 20% of emails that need a response today that you labeled as such. Okay.
Okay.
Now, remember, that's now 20% of your email inbox. It's way fewer emails than you'd
Mm-hmm.
expect. And
Mm-hmm.
only reply to those emails that you labeled as requiring a response today. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what about all those other emails? What about the 80% of emails you get per day that need a response sometime this week? Where's the time saving? Here's the time savings. There's a magical thing that happens when you let emails marinate. Because what people don't understand is that if you want to get fewer emails in a period of time, you have to send fewer emails in a given period of time.
Right.
What way too many people do is they respond to emails that are easy to reply to, quick answers. And what happens is we get into this email ping pong game
Uh-huh.
where it's back and forth and back and forth and back and forth because they're easy to reply to, even if they don't need a reply today. So by slowing down that email ping pong game, okay, those 80% of emails that you get per day that don't need an immediate response, here's what happens. You save all that email ping pong that didn't need to happen today because you realize it can be responded to one time per week, not every day.
Right.
Because, you know, as soon as you send someone an email, they're going to send it right back. You're not actually getting rid of anything. You're just
Yeah.
increasing the total number of emails you receive. So that's one benefit. Another benefit is that when you let emails marinate, they disappear.
Mm-hmm.
They evaporate. How? People realize, wait a minute, okay, it looks like something else urgent came around, or maybe I'll figure this out on my own, or maybe I'll ask somebody else, or maybe I'll Google it for myself if I need the answer to something.
Uh-huh.
And by giving it a little bit of time, what you will find is that those 80% of emails that don't need an urgent reply, that can reply to sometime this week, they'll shrink. They just
Yeah.
magically disappear. They'll be crushed under the weight of people's other priorities, and they don't need an urgent reply. And so you
Wow.
will reduce dramatically the number of emails that actually need a reply just by sorting out the ones that need a response today and the ones that can use a reply sometime this week. So for me, in my calendar, I have about an hour and a half of email replying to urgent emails that need a reply today.
Mm-hmm.
Then every Monday, I call it Message Monday. On Message Mondays, I have a 3-hour block to flush through all those emails that didn't need an urgent reply just sometime this week. And that has dramatically cut down on the time I spend on emails.
Wow, that's gold. Gold right there. Thank you. Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
That's the tip of the iceberg. There's so
You-
much more.
yeah, I know. Nir, I think we're going to wrap it up there. I do have one final question that I like
Sure.
to ask all the guests. On our podcast, one of the things we do is we take the longer form interviews and we publish those, but we also cut them up into 2 to 10 minute episodes and publish those on Monday and Friday. But I always ask, there's plenty of golden tips here that we can create those high performance episodes. But what are some of your, let's just say, what's your daily routine look like for a guy like you, how you manage your life? What is your morning wake up time? What do you do in the mornings, afternoon, evening, and then bedtime sleep schedule?
Yeah. So so one of the secrets to becoming indistractable is to use a time box calendar, is to plan your time ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't, you can't call something a distraction unless you know what distracted you from. So I see my daily schedule every single day because I plan it in advance. Now, it
Right.
doesn't always stay the same from week to week, but in my calendar is 15 minutes that I take every single Sunday to plan the week ahead. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it takes almost no time, less than 15 minutes. Sometimes it takes me less than 5 minutes, but I have to sit down and plan that calendar because again, if you don't know what you got distracted from, you can't say you got distracted. So
Mm-hmm.
my routine now that I've been doing this for several years, and this completely changed my life, is I know it's pretty rote. I know what's going to happen. So every day I get up around 7 and 7:15 to 8, I have breakfast with my family. From 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, I do interviews because I'm in Singapore. So that's my best time to do interviews with the States.
Yeah.
From 10 to noon, I have my email time. So about 2 hours or so. And then for lunchtime, from 12 to 1, I have lunch. And then from 1 to 1:30, I do some morning pages reflection. And then from 1:30 to 3:30, I write. And then from 3:30, that block of time change from day to day. Either I'll take a walk or do some exercise, listen to some articles or podcasts. Then I have dinner with my family at 6. And then after 6, I'll do some interviews with the States. Again, that's a good time because it's 12-hour time difference.
Uh-huh.
And that's a pretty typical schedule. Now, that doesn't mean that it's set in stone forever. So
Right.
if I need to take a meeting, if I need to plan something, that's why sitting down for those 15 minutes per week and planning out, okay, if my values dictate that I need time for writing or time with my daughter or whatever the case might be, I may have to move some things around, but I know in advance what that schedule is going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Okay, let's wrap this up. I really have loved this interview. You're a genius, man. I'm going to apply this email hack that you told me as soon as we get off here. Nir, if the listeners want to learn more about what you have going on in your books and in your blog, where's the best place they can find you at?
Sure. Thanks. So my blog is nirandfar.com. Nir is spelled like my first name. So that's Nir and far.com. And my two books are Hooked, How to Build Habit Forming Products, and Indistractable, How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life. And that's available wherever books are sold.
Perfect, man. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all your tips and tricks with us. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Nir.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And listeners, we're going to wrap up there. Thank you guys for tuning in once again, and we'll see you on the next episode. Goodbye, everybody.